All right, so here we are back at it in video number 2. So in the last video, we talked about how essay writing is like stacking the deck. You need to make a bet worth making, stack your evidence, and show your work. So today we're going to go into that first move. We're going to look at making a bet worth making. So we're going to talk specifically about assertions here because that's what I saw that you needed the most work on. But I do want to make the point that when we talk about how to build assertions, this is really the same strategy that we're going to use to build a thesis statement. At its simplest, a thesis statement is just a topic plus a comment. So what are you going to talk about? What are you going to say about that topic? And we do want to make it arguable, but we get a little bit caught up in the wordsmithing and how to shape the sentence. And I think that that is a problem because you're learning the formula instead of understanding like how the formula works. So we want to make sure that we are doing something that is actually an argument. It's not just a statement. It's not just an observation. It's not something obvious because I do see this happening that students will get on a path where they're coming up with something that is really obvious and they spend the whole essay trying to prove that weak thesis, but there's really nothing to prove. And it's really, I said, you want something that is worth your time and worth my time. So for you to really learn and grow and do what English is supposed to do, you have to push yourself. So choosing the easy option actually tends to be the harder option and also limits where your grade can go. So remember what I said in video 1. If it's obvious, it's not an argument. So today I'm going to show you how to test your assertions and push them higher on that ladder that we talked about last video, because weak claims equal weak essays, no matter how good your evidence is. So as even if you were to like perfectly argue a weak essay or a weak argument, you'd still have a weak essay. Okay, so how do we do this? Okay, so think about it this way. If I said the sky is blue, would you need to write a 5-paragraph essay proving it? Well, on the surface level, no, it's obvious. Everyone agrees, right? There's no bet there. But what if I said the way we describe the sky as blue reveals cultural assumptions about how we categorize color? Now you might be like, wait, what? That's arguable, right? Someone could disagree, and I'd have to prove that. That's a bet. The difference isn't that one sounds smarter. It's that one is actually making an argument. It's a claim that needs evidence and reasoning to support it. So you can make something terrible, like sound smart, like it's not about that. It's really about having something that actually is worth your time and needs to be supported for someone to get to you from the known to the unknown. And this is where the ladder comes in. Between video 1 and video 2, I didn't come up with what to call this ladder. But again, maybe I did when I get into editing. But a lot of assertions, especially when students come into this year in general, are at level 2, maybe a level 1, sometimes level 3, maybe you're at a level 6. But, a lot of them are at that lower level, which are more observations about what's happening in the text. But to stack your deck, you need to climb higher. You need claims that are complex enough to be interesting and worth your time. Okay, so that ladder from video 1, let's show what it looks like to climb it with your assertions. So I'm going to use that Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel in AI example, and I'll show you what the same basic idea looks like at different levels. Okay, so first, when we talk about level 1 and level 2, we can say Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel didn't understand the internet in 1994, just like some people don't understand AI today. So it is noticing a similarity. It is something that I could talk about more, but it is also pretty obvious. Anyone watching those clips would see that. There's not really a lot of analysis to be done. At level 3 or maybe 4, we can say the dismissive attitude toward the internet in 1994 mirrors current skepticism about AI, revealing a pattern in how people respond to unfamiliar technology. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere because I'm not just noticing this one example, I'm identifying a pattern, which is something that we've been talking about already, right? So I'm going to make a claim about what this similarity means. So what this means for how people respond to unfamiliar technology. But we can actually go higher. So 5 or 6, we can say, the way established media figures dismissed the internet in 1994 reveals how institutions respond to disruptive technology by delegitimizing it rather than engaging with it, which is a pattern we see repeatedly with AI, suggesting that skepticism often serves to protect existing power structures rather than assess genuine risks. So now we're at the top. This isn't just here's a pattern, but here is what that pattern reveals about power institutions and how change actually happens. Okay, so what we're doing here is each time we added a level of sophistication, we actually added a variable that we're going to have to manage. So we went from that basic topic and then we added something to it. So we added a comment of the pattern, and then we added another variable, which is how that skepticism serves to protect existing power structures rather than assess genuine risks. So we're making a couple different stacked pieces of the argument on top of, we're stacking pieces of the argument here. So we're building argument within our assertion. And like I said, this could actually be a thesis, like this is what we're going to break down in our essay, or it could be an assertion in that this fits within some bigger idea. So the process of building both a thesis and assertion are the same in that you want to make a claim and think about these layers. It's really just like the size and scope and what you can handle. Something that is interesting to think about, regardless of whether your essay is going to be 2 pages or it's going to be 20 pages, you're really going to have basically 3, maybe 4 main claims. So it's not about paragraph necessarily when you're making your argument. You just want to think about, like, here is the overall argument, and then within it, these are the 3 claims that I'm going to make that support that overall thesis. But overall, what we need to think about is this arguable? Could someone reasonably push back against this? And is this a bet worth making? So each level builds. You start with that observation, but you keep asking yourself, what? Why does this matter? What does this reveal? And each time you ask that, you can climb higher on the ladder. And the higher you climb, the more you're stacking your deck. As you stack your argument, you stack your deck, because level 1 claims are weak bets. And level 5 or 6, now you're really making an argument that makes me think. So that's what I'm looking for. Okay, so now that you know what you're aiming for, climbing that ladder, how do you actually test whether your assertion is strong enough? And that's where these 5 questions come in. So here's your tools. The first one is, can someone smart disagree with us? Not someone who's just being difficult, someone smart who has read the same text that you did. Could they reasonably argue the opposite? If not, you don't have an argument yet. You have an observation, so you want to push it further. And then the second question is to think about where this sits on the ladder. And at this point, you really want to be honest with yourselves. If you are at level 1 or 2, you're just pointing out what's there. But when you've climbed to 3 or 4 and maybe higher, you're thinking about what you're actually analyzing and interpreting. And the stronger your bet is, like, it correlates to how high you're climbing. So if you're at the bottom, that's okay, but you need to push your thinking up. And what I've said to you in class is you want to make the most sophisticated argument you can hold on to. And I'll add a caveat too. It's the most sophisticated argument you can hold on to in the amount of time that you are given. So if I'm saying you need to write an essay in an hour or 35 minutes, or you need to write something in 10 minutes. You need to think about the size of the idea that you can hold on to and try to push yourself to figure out what you can manage in whatever amount of time that you get. So if you have like, you know how time works. If you have longer, you can make a more sophisticated argument. And then next is, would I bet on this? And you need to seriously think about this. Would you put money on this claim? And does it feel solid or does it feel shaky? And if you're not confident enough to bet on it, why should I be convinced by it? Because weak claims make weak essays, and make a bet that you actually believe in. That's what you want to do. Actually, I just want to go back to question 2 for a second. And one of the strategies to keep in mind is thinking about like how many variables are embedded in your argument. So that's something that you can just ask yourself as you're thinking about what level you're at, is how many different variables are embedded in your argument. So that is something else for you to think about. So where are we? So every assertion should be stacking your deck. And remember, like I said in the last video, each piece, every sentence, every little bit that you put into your essay should be stacking your deck. And if it's not, you need to cut it or revise it. So number 5, can I prove this with the evidence I have? So this is when we think about that continuum from factual to absurd, you need to make sure that you are not completely in the absurd. We're not talking about aliens. So don't make claims that you can't back up. If you're asserting something like, and you're thinking there's maybe a quote that supports this, then there's a problem. Your assertion should really come from your evidence, not the other way around. And this is something that I find personally pretty frustrating when students come up with the argument and then they say that they're going to add the quotes in later. That is completely backwards, in my opinion. You really should be building from your evidence and not doing it the other way around, finding evidence to support your assertion. Because if you just think about this in life, and this is why it's important, it's that confirmation bias. So we want to seek out information that is in support of what we already believe. It's like a natural human motivation. Like we want for what we read and what we hear to support what we already think. There's a danger in that, of course, right? If we only seek out or consume information that supports what we already think, we get that confirmation bias. We think that everybody believes what we believe. And also, we never think about the edges of our argument and where we might be wrong. And that's really dangerous, right? Like, if we never consider that our argument might be false, it might be simplistic, it might be one sided. And that's the same thing that you all do as writers, if you first think about what your argument is and then go back and find evidence that supports it. It's a little bit of like, you might, as you're reading, say, oh, wait, I think that the author is doing something here. And as you continue to read, you might find information to test your hypothesis. And you might go back to what you've already read to test. Is that a correct hypothesis? Is this what they seem to be doing? As you're doing that, you should still be considering, wait, this doesn't fit into that pattern. Do I need to adjust my pattern, or is this just like an outlier? So I think that kind of thinking is totally appropriate. But what is not appropriate is when you aren't taking in all the evidence in a way that you can consider those outliers, so that you can complicate your thinking, so that you can understand the complexity of the author's argument. So, all that said, make sure you actually have the ammunition before you take your shot, so that the evidence is what helps you to really prove that your argument is valid, and you need to make sure that it is fully supported in the text. So these are the 5 questions. And I really think that these are questions that you should ask yourself every single time you sit down to write an assertion or a thesis. And if it fails any of them, you just revise. And make it accurate. So push your thinking and climb that ladder. Don't settle for weak claims just because they sound okay, or even if they sound smart, if they don't follow what's in those 5 questions. All right, so we have built assertions worth betting on, and we can now use that ladder to push your thinking. So we can now get beyond settling for the obvious by using those 5 questions to test if you're where you need to be. In the next video, we're going to talk about evidence. So how to actually use quotes and examples without confusing your reader, that actually strengthen your argument and that are nicely embedded into your paragraphs, because it's really important that you have strong evidence, because your assertion falls apart if you don't know how to support it properly. Okay, so that's it. Remember, if it's obvious, it's not an argument, and you want to make me think and consider your ideas, stack your deck with strong claims, and we'll get into the next video where we're going to talk about evidence.